Very wonderful theme, and it's liberating our lands. We need to liberate the lands in Arizona. And as he makes his presentation to you, I want you to think of these following things. I want you to remember the $3 billion deficit that Arizona has worked its way, crawling and kicking, trying to get out of. And we're still in really scary territory, but at least the last 2 years we've been able to balance our budgets because of good representatives that you have sent down there. And but I want you to remember that. I want you to think about the fact that our global economy is teetering. We're not hearing a lot about it right now because we're in the middle of this election and that's all we're hearing from the media. But believe me, these things are still happening across this world, and our global economy is in a lot of trouble. I want you to remember that our job forecast is stagnant. Where I live in Navajo County, we are really struggling. We are losing our paper mill, ladies and gentlemen. It's been there over 50 years. I remember as a young girl when it was being built in Snowflake. It has been our economic engine in Navajo County. It provides more taxes to our school than any of our other industry. And we're going to lose over 300 direct jobs as it closes. It is a direct result of failed federal excessive regulations that have been placed upon our businesses in America. When our paper mill had to stop using pulpwood in our forests because of the constant lawsuits brought about by environmentalists due to wanting to protect the Mexican spotted owl. And they finally made the decision to go recyclable to see if they could get away from that so they could stay in business. And that was really the end of our paper mill. They have struggled ever since. We also have the EPA attacking our coal plants up there. All about regional haze. This isn't about something coming out of the power plants that is making you sick, because over the last 20 years we have really cleaned up our coal plants through the wonderful technology we have in this country. The state made an agreement with EPA, and our coal plants have been putting new emission controls upon their plants that has cost them hundreds of millions of dollars, and then EPA this summer said, that's not good enough. We want you to put another $1 billion into your plant, and guess what? It isn't going to make any difference in what they're calling a haze problem over the Grand Canyon. You aren't going to see any difference visibly once that technology is put in place. It's not about the haze, it's about putting coal plants out of business. We're talking about another 700 jobs, not to mention the cost and what would happen in electricity prices. We have a problem with our Eurofresh greenhouse where they raise tomatoes and cucumbers. And where Mexico is dumping a lot of tomatoes into our market. So you're buying cheap tomatoes at the grocery store, but it's threatening jobs again down by Safford, a greenhouse down there that employs 1,700 people, and the greenhouse in my area, because they can't compete. And it's part of NAFTA, part of these free trade agreements. So I want you to think about how the federal government is controlling so many aspects of our lives that we cannot make our economy work anymore. And next I want you to remember about our $16 trillion debt. We've just reached $16 trillion. I want you to also think about that Congress is $1.6 trillion in deficit in the budget. We're not talking about the national debt, we're talking about their budget this year. They've spent $1.6 trillion more than you and all the taxes that have been paid in. And then I want you to know that because we're in this crisis in our money, and we're not talking about it a lot, because we're all focused on this election, but Congress is going to, starting 2013, cut 13% from the federal dollars they're sending to all the states. So we're going to face that. And then as you start reading articles about Prop 204, the one sent they're wanting to increase our sales tax, for education. In Arizona, we have a struggle funding our education. It said here about that we're one of the highest states for the steepest cuts and percentage of cuts. They're beating us up over the cuts, but again, what has been going on since 2008? A recession where many states have lost billions of dollars in revenue, and this state was $3 billion in deficit. Please do not be sucked into voting for Prop 204, because as you hear this presentation, the answer tonight is what Representative Ivory is going to present to you. That is the solution to how we fund education in Arizona, how we get back to being able to regulate the lands, liberating the lands in our state. And I didn't even mention about the forest burning and how important it is that we get control of our forest. Calling you Senator already, Senator Crandall, because he's going to be our next Senator in 6, and Brenda's going to represent us again in 6. These are two great people. Brenda helped sponsor a bill that Ken Ivory's going to talk about, and so I'm hoping she'll introduce that again. And Representative Crandall helped to get on the ballot Prop 120. Please vote for state sovereignty. And be sure you read your proposition ballot book. Okay. Again, it's just a real honor to be here among such wonderful Americans, and I just really sincerely want you to know that when I come here, you help to refuel my energy, because it can be very exhausting, these battles, and to become around a lot of people that exert all this wonderful energy is great. And somebody who has tons of energy is Representative Ivory.
Let me just say
yes.
that Senator Allen grew up where I did, up in Heber, Snowflake area. And her family has deep roots there. And she knows what she's talking about. She has lived this, as my family has, in that area. And they're going to have nowhere to turn but their church and the government for subsistence for their families. As the Obama administration and the EPA put those power plants out of business, and that's what they're trying to do. He's trying to drive gasoline prices to $8 a gallon and trying to get rid of coal completely. And they're doing their best up there to comply, but now their standards are just out of this world, aren't they? They're
not attainable, and that's the point. You can't attain what they want us to do. Technology won't help, and I mean it's beyond what they can do, and so you have to understand it's about putting them out of business. It's not about the hate.
It's a utopia that can't be reached. And her family was in logging. My dad managed a paper mill for 25 years, from which he got his lumber from the Tenney family, and they've all been put out of business. There's no logging anymore to speak of. No. Up in that area.
No, and we're trying to bring that back, and that's one successful thing the county has done, has been able to get this what's called 4-Fry project. So, and up to this time, since all these big fires started, you, the taxpayers, have been paying $1,000 an acre to try to thin around these communities so they wouldn't burn up. We'd have a fire break, and that's not the way we're supposed to be managing our forests. We've got to go back. There's potential of $550 million a year of revenue generated from those forests. During the day when my brother's sawmills were running, he had 4 sawmills in 4 different communities. There were 15 sawmills in Arizona at one time.
Listen to that. Listen.
We had 11,000 direct jobs. The forest, we never had a forest fire like what you've seen in the last 12 years. Never. Chester comes from that background in working in the forest. He can tell you. The loggers were the first ones on a fire. And they would start doing the breaks, and they'd get the fires out, and we would have, 2,000-acre fires. That was a big fire. 20,000 acres.
What we should have done is just deport the Mexicans spotted out back to Mexico.
In the Wallow fire, yes. But again, it's not about the owls.
No,
in the Wallow fire, 79 owl nests were burned. They know, because they know where they're at. They burned them up.
So they're all dead now anyway.
All the little baby owls were burned, along with tons of wildlife. You don't think that wildlife doesn't get burned in those fires? Of course they do. And then than the fish, because the silt of all the fire and everything, of the dirt or the silt that comes in after the rains start, and then the flooding that happens and just destroys our watersheds.
And the fish.
It's insane. And that's why what we're going to talk about tonight is the answer. It's liberating our land.
She knows from whence she speaks is all I wanted to say. And when she says 300 families that in a rural community, that's a wipeout.
It's a wipeout.
That's a wipeout. So
I literally shed tears the day I heard the paper mill was closing. It's like a death. When you've had generations work in that mill, and the off jobs that come from that, the trucking, the people that are selling the product, it is a death. It's like a funeral. We have to do something. And till the day I die, I'm going to fight to save my forest, and I'm going to fight to liberate the lands in our state. Because we got off course 100 years ago when we became a state. They were supposed to dispose of our lands, and they did not do it. And so now it's time they do it. And Ken Ivory has been elected to the Utah legislature since 2010. He's married with 4 children. His wife teaches school. He is a man with tons of energy. He's a lawyer by profession. He knows the Constitution. He loves it. And you're going to see from his presentation, Utah has already passed all their legislation telling the federal government by 2014 they are to dispose of the unappropriated public lands in the state of Utah. That's what we're going to